The year 2025 began with a deceptive sense of normalcy. Cities awoke to the familiar rhythms of daily life, commuters filled the streets, coffee shops buzzed, and the world seemed to move forward as it always had. Resolutions were made, markets hummed with cautious optimism, and leaders in Washington and Beijing spoke publicly of stability and cooperation, assuring their citizens that peace and prosperity would endure. Yet beneath this calm exterior, powerful undercurrents were gathering, unseen by most, but felt by those attuned to the shifting tides of global affairs. The intricate web of global trade and technology, once robust and seemingly unbreakable, was fraying after years of growing mistrust and suspicion between the world's two largest economies. The United States had long hoped that China's rise would bring political liberalization and deeper partnership, but by the early 2020s, that hope had faded. What remained was a simmering rivalry, replacing decades of cautious cooperation. Tariffs, sanctions, and sweeping technology restrictions became the new normal, each one a small but significant tear in the fabric of globalization. Every new policy seemed to push the two powers further apart. Smaller nations, once the beneficiaries of US-China cooperation, now faced impossible choices, whether to align with Washington's security and technological standards, or to embrace Beijing's economic might and growing influence. For many, neutrality was no longer an option. As 2025 unfolded, diplomatic channels froze, military exercises intensified on both sides, and the rhetoric from leaders grew sharper and more uncompromising. The world watched as tensions escalated, fearing what might come next. The world sensed that the post-Cold War era was ending, replaced by a more divided, unpredictable, and uncertain chapter in human history. The US-China rivalry was no longer a chronic condition simmering in the background. It was reaching a breaking point, threatening to reshape the global order itself. The global order, painstakingly built on decades of integration and cooperation, was about to unravel before the eyes of a watching world. The signs were clear for those who looked. Alliances strained to the breaking point, economies braced for shocks, and ordinary people everywhere held their breath, uncertain of what the future would bring. The era of American dominance and global integration, which had shaped the world for generations, was drawing to a close, leaving behind a sense of nostalgia and apprehension. A new, more fractured history was about to be written, one marked by division, competition, and the struggle for influence in a rapidly changing world. And 2025 would be the year it all began, a turning point that would define the course of the century to come. For years, the world watched as the US and China danced around each other in a high-stakes game of economic and technological competition. But in the spring of 2025, the fragile illusion that this rivalry could be managed peacefully was shattered, not by the outbreak of war, but by a wave of sweeping, unprecedented economic policies that sent shockwaves through global markets. The United States took a bold step, enacting the Strategic Economic Security Act. This landmark legislation forced American companies to withdraw from China, slashed investment in Chinese technology, and imposed strict new controls on cross-border business. Overnight, decades of economic integration began to unravel. The era of engagement was declared over. In its place, a new strategy emerged: containment. The US signaled it would no longer seek partnership, but instead work to limit China's rise. China responded swiftly and decisively. With its dual circulation fortification plan, Beijing doubled down on self-sufficiency, ramping up domestic innovation and targeting US firms with its own set of restrictions and incentives. The message from China was clear. It would build its own parallel system, determined to chart an independent course and no longer play by Western rules or expectations. For global corporations, the consequences were immediate and severe. Businesses that had thrived on a single interconnected market suddenly found themselves split in two, forced to pick sides and begin the painful process of untangling supply chains that had taken decades to build. What had once been dismissed as a distant possibility, decoupling, was now a harsh reality. Factories stood idle, shipments stalled, and the world's economic arteries began to clog. But this rivalry was no longer just about trade or technology. It had become a clash of systems, democracy versus authoritarianism. Each side painted the other as a fundamental threat to the global order, fueling tensions at every level. the contest now reached into the realm of ideas, values, and alliances, reshaping the very foundations of international relations. The world was being redrawn, not just economically, but ideologically. The economic split was only the first sign of a deeper, more profound divergence, one that would touch every aspect of life, from technology to culture to security. In boardrooms, government offices, and living rooms around the world, people felt the shockwaves. Uncertainty and anxiety spread as the old rules no longer applied. The world was entering a new era, one defined not by cooperation but by division, rivalry, and the urgent search for a new balance. As economic ties frayed, the US and China turned to a new battleground: artificial intelligence. Both saw AI dominance as the key to 21st century power, igniting a digital arms race. The US launched the National AI Acceleration Initiative, pouring billions into R&D and uniting government, industry, and academia. China doubled down on its state-led model, mobilizing tech giants and leveraging vast data resources to leapfrog the US. Scientific collaboration collapsed. Universities became fortresses, and researchers faced suspicion and restrictions. The AI race became zero-sum, with secrecy and fewer ethical safeguards. Progress slowed, risks grew, and the stakes rose higher than ever. The future of global power would be decided not just by economies, but by algorithms. Economic decoupling sent shockwaves worldwide, shaking the very foundations of global commerce and investment. The world watched as old certainties vanished almost overnight, and the ripple effects were felt in every major financial center. Trade and investment maps were redrawn at a dizzying pace. US-China trade plummeted to historic lows, factories shuttered across China, shipping lanes slowed, and prices for everyday goods soared in markets around the globe. Uncertainty spread like wildfire, leaving investors and businesses scrambling to adapt. Yet amid the turmoil, new winners began to emerge. Vietnam, Mexico, India, and Indonesia quickly rose as manufacturing hotspots. Companies, eager to avoid risk, fled China and poured investments into these nations, fueling rapid industrial growth and transforming local economies. The global supply chain, once seamless and interconnected, became fragmented and regionalized. Production networks split into competing hubs, and logistics grew more complex as companies sought stability in new regions. Meanwhile, the US and China intensified their competition for influence in Africa and Latin America, pouring billions into infrastructure projects and vying for access to critical resources. This rivalry extended beyond trade, reshaping alliances and development priorities. Financial systems fractured as well. China aggressively promoted the yuan and its own digital payment networks, directly challenging the dollar's long-standing dominance in global finance. The world edged toward competing currency blocks, with nations weighing the risks and rewards of aligning with different financial systems. This added new layers of complexity and risk to international trade and investment. The battle for economic influence had become truly global, with every region and industry now a potential battleground for power and prosperity. Every nation, from the largest economies to the smallest, was forced to adapt rapidly, revising strategies, forging new partnerships, and rethinking their place in the world economy. The old order of seamless globalization was gone. In its place stood a patchwork of shifting alliances, rival currencies, and fortunes that could change overnight. The rules of the game had been rewritten. The world economy was being remade in real time, with every headline and market move shaping a new era of uncertainty and opportunity. As US-China walls rose, a frantic scramble for alliances began. The US reinvigorated NATO, formalized the Quad, and launched new pacts like AUKUS to counter China's influence. China built its own network, deepening ties with Russia, Central Asia, and the Global South, using economic leverage and the Belt and Road Initiative. Middle powers like Brazil and Turkey refused to pick sides, extracting concessions from both. The world became a patchwork of shifting blocks, with alliances more fluid and influence more diffuse than ever. The global internet finally fractured in 2025, creating two incompatible tech ecosystems. The US-led sphere championed open data and privacy. China's sphere centralized data for governance and surveillance. Choosing a tech provider became a geopolitical act, dividing nations and users. Apps, platforms, and standards split. Digital islands emerged, each with its own rules and realities. The dream of a single digital commons faded. the race to set global tech standards became a new front in the rivalry. The splinternet was now a permanent feature of the 21st century. Behind the headlines, millions felt the cost of the great unraveling. Student exchanges collapsed, workers in both countries lost jobs or faced new challenges as industries shifted. Economic hardship and social dislocation spread, showing globalization's ties couldn't be severed without pain. Yet adversity sparked innovation. US startups built resilient supply chains, while China launched a drive for semiconductor independence. New opportunities emerged from crisis, as entrepreneurs adapted and communities rediscovered local production. The story of 2025 was one of broken connections, but also resilience and reinvention. The human spirit found ways to adapt, even as the world fractured. Out of disruption, new paths began to form. By year's end, the world had crossed a threshold. Two competing visions now defined the global order. The US offered liberal democracy, free markets, and alliances of like-minded nations. China promoted state-led development, stability, and partnerships without political conditions. Each vision shaped technology, trade, and development models worldwide. Nations navigated a complex landscape, sometimes using both systems to their advantage. The rivalry was embedded in daily life, from digital infrastructure to political norms. The world was now a contest of blueprints for the 21st century. The future would be shaped by which vision prevailed, or how they coexisted. As 2025 ended, the world stood at a crossroads, the old order gone and the new one still forming. Would the US and China manage their rivalry peacefully, or was this just the beginning of a deeper, more dangerous struggle? The best hope managed competition, clear red lines, and cooperation on global threats. The worst fear escalation, AI arms races, and conflict over flashpoints like Taiwan. The future depends on choices made in capitals worldwide, by leaders, innovators, and citizens alike. 2022 bauer, Albrestitrin and 25 wins, Schuer, Bagger, Waitwai mark the end of one era and the start of another. The story of the century is now the story of two powers and their visions. The world waits, hoping the next chapter brings stability, not catastrophe.